Innotribe, please welcome Global Head of Transaction Services for ING, Mr. Mark Buitenhek.
And a very good morning to you all. When I said yes to this adventure, I would never have guessed that there are hundreds of people now looking at this. We're in the era of moving from, let's say, the Bitcoin to the blockchain and beyond. We're moving from complete disbelief to engagement of both newcomers and banks in this era. But the jury is still out whether or not blockchain or anything that represents a blockchain will be the solution to every question that we have. We're going to have a really interesting session. I'm really seeing that you're so engaged, and it's going to get hotter and hotter, so enjoy it right now. But before we move into the first block, let me introduce our panelists who are here and our speakers at the corner. Can we have, yes, that's Adam Ludwin on this side. He's the CEO of Chain.com. And there's always a question, Adam, what is Chain.com? Are you a fintech? What are you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm not a planted audience member, despite where I'm sitting. It looks a little bit like that. Chain.com, we launched 2 years ago when nobody had heard of blockchain. Nobody cared about blockchain technology. And to your question, are we a fintech company? Yes. Blockchain technology is financial technology, but it's very different in one critical way from most fintech that you're going to see this week at Innotribe. And that is, fintech, for the most part, is at the top of the financial stack. It's making it easier to use credit cards, debit cards, payments, invoicing, etc. It's big data, analytics, driving insights. That's the very top of the financial stack. Everyone up here, including our company Chain, is exactly the opposite. We're at the very bottom of the financial stack. And what I mean by that specifically is blockchain is all about a new medium for money and assets. It's about enabling assets to be issued digitally in a native digital form. And once you do that, it's again the very bottom, but once you do that, the promise is that we can have a global, interoperable, instant financial system. And so it's a long game, it's a long arc. We've been at it 2 years. We've raised money from NASDAQ, Visa, Fiserv, Capital One, Citi, several institutions.
So,
and it's going to take time, but it is fintech.
So
yes.
This is your 30-second answer. This is going to be something for the rest of the meeting. So may I introduce the next speaker? And that is Joyce Kim. Joyce, you work at Stellar.org. It's a non-profit organization. What is a non-profit organization doing here?
I know. It's a little confusing for everybody. Stellar.org is a nonprofit focused on increasing financial inclusion for the world's poor. And we do that by building open source software that can be used. It's a distributed ledger focused on global interoperability and global transfer. The goal is to be neutral and low cost so that we can focus on figuring out how to increase financial access for people that live on $5, $2 a day. That community is roughly 2 billion people, so not a small market at all.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And the next speaker, here he is, Dan O'Prey, the Chief Marketing Officer of Digital Asset Holdings. By the way, you're also in the Innotribe finals, right?
We are, yes. We're
Congratulations.
in the final on Wednesday.
Are you going to win?
We'll see. There's 12 companies. I'm sure they're all very good. So please come along.
But this is the time to make an advertisement for yourself, right?
Absolutely. It's a very exciting event.
All right. And here's the next one. Preston, you were once a securitization lawyer.
Yes, for my sins, yeah.
How did you end up in this place?
So in this place, there's a technology called smart contracts, which is sort of becoming a bit hot at the moment. And basically, a smart contract is putting a stored procedure or a complex piece of business logic onto a blockchain, using the blockchain to verify the history of that process, and then using the smart contract to secure the execution of that process.
Oh, actually, it's a small step from a lawyer to a contract to...
It's actually not. It's not far at all, because lawyers are just about managing steps and execution.
Exactly.
So
no, thank you very much. The next guest, Oliver Busman from UBS. You have driven major business changes over your life. Can we compare blockchain with those major business changes?
No, I think this is massive simplification. I would say that banking processes in place for 100 years plus will be massively disrupted. And from that perspective, the ecosystem driving that collaboration and also defining that market standard going forward will be very critical.
All right, thank you very much. And the next one. Here he is, Simon Taylor, blockchain R&D from Barclays. You are named as one of the 40 most influential people or top 10 fintechs in the world. How did you get there? Or was it just the UK?
No, it's just I don't know. It's largely thanks to Duenna Blomstrom. So shout out Duenna. I think it's also because I have a beard, and people tend to believe people with beards or that they think they're technically geeky. Now, I followed Innotribe for many years at home, and I would be very enthusiastic about fintech. I naturally get excited about it, and what I'm excited most about, everything happening in fintech at the moment, is the blockchain space. Massively misunderstood, but as Oliver said, I think huge potential for actual disruption, and I really want to get into why and how do we make that real.
All right, let's come back to that later. And the next one, there he is, Neil Cross, the Chief Innovation Officer for DBS. You have had, what your CV said is that you have 20 years of experience in innovation, financial services, etc. What is the biggest change that you've seen over those 20 years?
Geez, where do we start really?
It's an open question.
Yeah. It's, I've been in this industry for a long time. I think, the biggest things when I look at tech, it's, will this new tech fundamentally enable us to do something we could never do before? I think the biggest change that I've seen so far is obviously mobile. In fairness, the fact that now we can do everything on a tiny device and it's portable, it's got a location, it's got sensors, it sits in our pocket. The next big thing is absolutely blockchain.
All right, let's see later. And then the final, but not the least speaker here, Lida. You're the head of the EMEA Innovation Officer for Bank of New York Mellon. And previously you worked at a startup. Is there any difference in working in a startup and a bank these days?
Well, I went from one fintech to another. So in terms of what it is we do for a living on a day-to-day basis, finance and technology and delivering solutions to scale, there wasn't much of a difference to the problems we were trying to solve. But much like Adam over on the other side, I was in a startup that was trying to solve deep-end problems. And it is much more challenging and much more likely to solve those problems in a big institution, which is why I made the transition about 6 years ago from a startup to a much older fintech.
Aha. Okay, so thank you very much. So these are our speakers, and I'm just facilitating the whole stuff. But before we go into the first round of, because we're playing this in 2 blocks with questions, I have some questions for you. You've all got a sort of a BlackBerry type of device. And we're going to ask you I couldn't name it somewhere else. So there are 4 questions that we're going to ask you. And the first question is going to be, please select, if you're not able to answer this, then you're in serious trouble. Eh? Please select which one of these best defines your role. Are you a banker? Are you a startup? A technologist? Or anything else? The clock starts now. Well, the bankers are no longer in the majority here. There's still a big stack, 43%, but the technologists, or that's bankers that call themselves technologists, you never know, but at least this is how it's been spread all over this room. Let's go to the next question. Please indicate in which age bracket you fall, and you are allowed to deviate slightly, so we made larger buckets. But please stay as close to where you really are, right? So, are you a millennial, 30 and under? Are you a Gen Y, 30, 40? Are you a Gen X? Ooh. Or are you a baby boomer? The answers start now. You're not filling in this question. Well, guys, Gen X, baby boomer, we're still in the majority here. But luckily, 6% millennials, really, really young people. Let's move to the next third question. So this is about the relevance of blockchain. For which area of the financial sector is blockchain most relevant? Is it 1, payments, 2, securities, 3, trade, or 4, others. And others could also mean all of the above. So please answer the question now. Still see people thinking. Aha, other. And that is the interesting thing. If you would have asked this question last year, probably the answer would be the majority would be on payments. So it's good to see there are more people thinking about blockchain to be used in another set. And now a question, especially for the bankers, but actually for all of you, the next one. How seriously is your organization looking at blockchain technology? Is it 1, not interested, and that's why you're probably here. 2, just monitoring the space. 3, planning to do something soon, actively already doing something like a proof of concept, or seriously investing in it. The clock starts now. Oh, we've moved from just monitoring to actually planning and doing something. So this is actually a fantastic result.
You can see the answers by the demographic as well if you want to see the next slide. Millennials or
Oh, is that also possible?
see that now, yeah.
Okay, we can also see how the millennials just voted on this and the others and the demographic. Can you show that? Oh, this is fantastic. Actively doing something. The bankers actually are doing something actively here. And Gen Y is actually working a lot. Oh, it's more or less along the lines that we were expecting. So take a picture. This is a real survey. So, yeah, and it's live, so it counts. So we're now slowly moving into the panel of the topic 1. And topic 1 is about the relevance of blockchain technology for the sector. What are we actually missing? How serious is it actually? And this is what the panelists have said about what it actually is, what their thoughts are. So what you can now see the statements on the slides, what people actually are thinking. So let me start with Oliver. Oliver, yeah, read your statement. So your statement was, blockchain, are banks really ready? What do you think? Are banks really ready? Sorry, you need a microphone. So.
Okay,
That's
good.
working. All right, thank you.
I think, Peter, if you would ask me that question a year ago, I think people would get killed and shot, saying, because there was no differentiation between Bitcoin and blockchain. I think if you look at I'm part of the World Economic Forum Financial Service Innovation Group with 30 banks and financial institutes. We analyzed over 11 innovation spaces, very good white paper out there. And after that year, everybody agreed on, the only one topic that we want to work together is blockchain. So there is. I think the survey is clearly stating is the banks are getting ready to understand, what is the impact, what are the use cases, and then also to understand that collaboration, open standard, teaming up like the R3 consortium is necessary, because I can do something in my lab, but doesn't help me to see it doesn't work with my counterparties, with other banks, etc. And then the third thing is also the regulators are really actively engaged in the discussion too.
Yeah, you just made a point on R3. Is that also the reason that you were one of the first joiners for R3?
Yeah, it's all about, at the end we're talking about Internet 5.0 or the new market standard for sharing market infrastructure as a standard for different asset classes and type of transaction going forward. And it's only possible if we have a critical mass in the industry agreeing on those standards, because if not, fragmentation and complexity will increase. I think from that perspective, it is necessary to team up and drive that common standard.
Yeah, and actually it's sort of filling the gap that is between organizations, and that's actually a very nice bridge to Simon. Blockchain technology as the peak of the hype cycle, yet is completely missing understanding. That's a fascinating remark for a VP blockchain.
Well, this is what I find is people think, it was interesting, your survey said people think it's a payments technology. I don't. I think it's a reconciliation technology. I think it's a way of dealing with errors, with sanctions and identity, with trade and all the paper that sits around it. Those those are the things that really excite me. But also, then, if you asked 10 people in this room what a blockchain is, you'll get 10 different answers. And I think that's why it's at the peak of the hype cycle, because we need to understand it. We need to come to a shared agreement of, okay, what is it and what are we going to do about it? And that's why, as Oliver said, things like R3 are so important, because actually we need to develop that standard framework, something Swift has been all about for a long time. Very, very important that we agree what is it and what are we going to use it for, so that we can all get benefit from it. Absolutely, I see it's market infrastructure, but more than market infrastructure, that's the second layer. There's a layer below that, which is, this is an open protocol, in the same way that Java is, in the same way that the internet is, and the financial services industry needs to understand and foster that development. That's really crucial.
Okay, talking about the need to do something, Neil, blockchain doesn't allow us to do something we couldn't fundamentally do before.
Yeah, well, you did ask for a contentious statement, so I thought I'd put that one out there. My point is, it's obviously made innovation a lot more likely. Previously, we could do pretty much everything that blockchain does, but it is huge cost, and it took a long time. The fact that we needed central authorities. So my point here really is we're at the top of the hype cycle, yeah. And what we see with new technologies, people try and retrofill it into current problems, say, hey, we can use it to fix everything.
Yeah.
My job as an innovation leader is to work out, what should we look at first? What's going to have the biggest impact on our business? Does it enable us to do something we couldn't do before? And also, will it drive out operational and technology costs? I think the great thing about blockchain is nothing to do with technology costs. It's operational costs. The fact you don't need central authorities, the fact you don't need loads of governance processes and people to manage those connections between external entities, that's the real magic, I feel, of blockchain.
Oh, that's very clear. Lida, do you have a different opinion there?
No, not really. In fact, it's almost rehearsed, the way we're building up on what each other is saying.
And it's not rehearsed because you were not at
I was not here. But we are actually building on what each other is saying, because we're sitting in the same side of the room and the same time of the industry, and work together on a series of fundamental questions. Last year, we would have had the same conversation, and most of our institutions would, to Oliver's point, be uncomfortable with the distinctions between Bitcoin and underlying technologies. We have gone through that to the point where the technologists are playing with the new protocols, and they're actually having both opinions and really substantive conversations about what would you build this in, what would it look like. We've moved on to applying the technology to solving actual problems for today. But to me, what is interesting is that this technology has forced us to rethink our entire value chain in a way that we had never done before. Whether the solutions to the new paradigm that will emerge will be on the blockchain is not to be known yet, but we're thinking about what it is we are for as banks and as financial institutions in a way we had never done before as a result of the capabilities brought to the table by this technology.
Okay, so in your opinion, blockchain is not an answer searching for a problem, but it is real.
My opinion is that it's a very, very interesting set of capabilities, a very interesting set of technologies that has started a rethink of the entire industry. Whether the two will end up evolving in parallel remains to be seen.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to the other side, to the newcomers here. Adam, do you have a different stance on this? Is blockchain really going to drive something, or is it just technology that has the opportunity to do as much technology to help us save costs and simplify life, etc.?
Yeah.
What is your opinion?
So this is the voice over IP moment for financial services. Okay, you can go on Skype, dial your grandmother, have a nice conversation with her. I'm sure she's lovely. Hang up the phone, and that's nothing different than it was 20 years ago when you picked up the phone and there was an analog dial tone, and it was routing over switched networks. So yes, it doesn't allow us to do something fundamentally different for the end user. Of course, the voice over IP architecture and stack is transformative and completely disruptive. So I think we need to separate, the end user experience from the actual guts of the infrastructure and the consequential sort of reduction in operating costs. A good example of that is if I take a photo on my iPhone and I send it to you, you don't actually get the photo I took. You get a copy of the photo I took. And that's how databases work today. They send copies. You can't send the actual photo. But if I send you $1, it's super, 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 super important that I don't have the dollar afterwards, right? So we can't actually achieve that with databases today because databases aren't designed like that. A blockchain is designed like that. A blockchain is designed to send the one true thing, like I said earlier, the digitally native asset itself to you, and therefore we need fewer intermediaries, fewer controls, less reconciliation, and that is truly transformative. So this will take time to play out, but that is new, that is important, and that will change the way institutions at this event function fundamentally.
So your plea is not to look at this as a faster horse, but as a completely different concept, right?
Different concept. The next session, I think, is called New Mediums for Money or New Forms of Money.
Future
That's actually,
of money.
what is it?
The future of money.
The future of money. The future of money, and this session actually is one and the same, and I'm sure that's why they were put together, because the blockchain enables the future of money. Thinking of just the blockchain is like saying, how do we think about databases? It's not the point. It's the asset itself that is changing its medium, and it's being enabled by all the technology here.
All right, thank you very much. Joyce, we need more academic and peer review. What is that going to solve?
So one of the challenges that we see, and one of the beauties of the space that Adam was talking about, was that because they're open, more people can join and connect, right? The goal is that when one financial institution in one country wants to send it to another, in another country, we don't have all this overhead. That will massively lower barriers, increase financial access. But it means more players will come into the market, and when that happens, you have to start figuring out, can it handle that scale, right? And one of the things that's still lacking in the space is solid testing at real-world transaction levels on testnets.
I fully agree. If you look at the skepticism of the financial industry, it's always about, can it handle the volume of transaction? What about reliance, reliability, security,
But that's solvable. Set up a testnet, flood it with transactions,
yeah,
fill it with accounts, and just start mimicking the type of volume you expect to see in your first real-world test. Right, and I've been surprised with the lack of those types of stress tests in the space.
Okay, thank you very much. Very helpful. Dan,
Yep.
well, it's gonna reduce errors, reduce costs, reduce risk, and free up capital, which is actually something that Neil said as well. This is about cost and etc. So you have the same position as Neil does here.
Similar, but I do believe that blockchain does create something fundamentally new. And to Simon's point, that is around cutting down on reconciliation as the primary benefit. Beyond just being a distributed database across multiple parties that no one can control, giving the ability for multiple financial institutions, incumbents today, to improve reduce their operational costs by having a universal record of truth for ownership is fundamentally different and we could never do before. So that's what, by working with incumbents to actually improve their system, it doesn't mean that they're going to be disrupted and banks are going to go out of place and shares are going to be sent P2P. But it does make a fundamentally different approach to how they operate today, which can help with reducing errors, cutting costs, and
clear
settlement risk.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the question for Preston is actually quite simple. What is that one thing?
Not have a server. It's actually really simple. I mean, if we look at what banks do, they provide two functions. They serve to administer pools of capital, and then they serve to execute process in respect of those capital and respective obligations that they have and their users, or their customers, rather. So what a blockchain allows you to do is it allows anybody, if you can specify what that thing means in advance, you can get a very high degree of verification. Bitcoin, for example, is an automatic robot clearing system. People know that if you've got a Bitcoin, and you spend that Bitcoin, they look back and they see that you've done it, they know that it's you that you've done it, without having a very large central server involved. So I think for the banks, it's a question of losing the monopoly on transaction verification and data verification. That's the big question for them. And also what it means if you can set up distributed infrastructure that provides that at very low cost.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great thing. So what everybody's saying, both on the bank side and on the newcomer side, there is a strong belief that this can fundamentally reshape the industry. Maybe it's about cost, maybe it's also about value-added services, maybe it's about reinventing the internet. This is the new internet. But it's clear, if you compare this with a few years ago, there was complete disbelief here in this room, and that's now completely changed, right? So are there any people in the audience that would like to ask a question to one of the panelists? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jacob Denelt. I'm with ItBit. My question has to do with privacy and how to adjudicate the difference between the open nature of these ledgers and information leak. because I know that there's a broad movement towards the idea of clearing and settlement using distributed ledgers. The problem with that being that if you're having a network verify other participants in the network's transactions, they're able to see them. Short of having a network that involves complete trust and only a 2 of 2 sign-off, meaning each party to a bilateral transaction agree that it's valid, how can you validate a network without sharing information?
You don't.
Well, you can, yeah. There's things like homomorphic encryption which allow you to actually verify without knowing either who's transacting and what the transaction amounts are, that the transaction is valid and correct. There are things like zero-knowledge proofs. Our CTO was one of the lead implementers of the library that's used for that today. Zuka Wilson at Zero Cash is doing great work related to zero-knowledge proofs as well. These are very complex cryptographic techniques. They're still early, but they have been proven so far. There is a slight performance hit, so you won't get as large a throughput as you would do otherwise, but Blockstream, Zero Cash are doing great work in this area.
And I think you see moving towards permissioned ledgers as well. I mean, the Stellar network is also designed in such a way that you can have permission groups and non-permission groups, and that allows different people to set the criteria for what they need. One of the things that we're aiming to get towards is the ability to handle to allow organizations that are using the Stellar backend to do tiered KYC type of transactions as well, so that it adjusts the technology to work with the regulatory environment that we see as being beneficial for financial inclusion.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions here in this room? Yes.
Hi, I'm Sven from KPMG. I might have a question to Oliver. You have a lot of corporations, you have the lab, you have joined the R3 initiative. What is the concrete perspective of UBS on blockchain?
I think it's important to mention that I think we are in the experimentation phase. So we are looking like everybody else at use cases. There are 20, 30, 40 use cases out there, and we decided to focus on few of them. So and if you visit us in lab level 39, you would see that is we implemented smart bonds on an Ethereum ledger. And the key learning for me looking at that is, in the moment you agree on a market infrastructure and on a piece of software that can replicate your financial products, it's all about, at the end, how you model those products on the ledger, and then what is the workflow on that. And the effort to get there is mind-blowing. So the market entrance cost is much lower in the future. We have to think about how we simplify those processes and then mirror financial products going forward. If we have that agreement on that infrastructure that at the end will drive trust, scalability, security. And that moment, I think you will see a tipping point.
Yeah. All right, I see. Yeah, that's right. I saw you nodding.
The question has moved on from why a blockchain to how.
How, yeah.
So, and I think that's something that all the banks share, is that we're not questioning why we should do this anymore. That argument has now been won and has flipped. And the question is how and which workflow, in which forum, with which standards. And we're in this phase where, there are some fantastic technology vendors over there who will partner with you and help you understand what their particular configuration looks like. But the jigsaw puzzle is still missing a lot of pieces, and actually putting those together in different ways and having the right forums to put them together as a group is really, really important, because this is market infrastructure that we're building.
But I think it's important to mention that we are going through different phases. One is understanding the potential of blockchain, focusing on the use cases. Next phase is teaming up. It's all about finding the right partners from a technology perspective and business partner. And the last piece is, I think, that we can parallelize is teaming up with the regulator.
Yeah.
That's the other topic.
Sorry, Adam, you wanted to react. Can you do this in a short time frame?
Can I do it shortly?
Thank you.
Yes. So to Oliver and Simon's point, something that we've built at Chain is called the Chain Sandbox, and it's a way for institutions to actually build and prototype in a test environment, like Joyce was saying. And the reason I think that, I just want to offer this suggestion. If you go into a vacuum in a conference room and you try to design a spec or an approach to how you're going to design a blockchain solution, you will fail every single time.
Yep.
You have to build real world things like Oliver said with the Smart Bonds initiative. From that you will learn, and then that will inform a generalized framework of action. So I would encourage you, whether you use Chain's platform or another, to really get a test framework in place, prototype, and do several prototypes and use that to inform your strategy. And that's what we've seen has been very successful with NASDAQ and others.
I can fully agree. There's Lida. You had
just to jump in and just comment in the shape of the thing. Ultimately, we have, as institutions, have accelerated our learning process from disbelief to actually cutting our teeth and using the technology to trying to answer two fundamental questions, one of which Oliver and Simon have already talked to. What does day zero look like? Because all the conversations we have had are about this abstract future where everything is on a distributed ledger capability, and we can all imagine that.
I agree.
But day one is very hard. And as Oliver says, you start drawing it out and realize that a lot of old world stuff will need to interface with new world stuff to get started. And that's a very hard conundrum to get your head around. And it takes a lot of back to front working out and a lot of philosophical questions. And then there is the other piece, the one that we're struggling with, but is actually a creative kind of struggling, which is, if you think about how we make money as institutions, it is based on a set of ways of doing things that are in some ways completely changed by these capabilities. In a good way. They will change the cost elements of our business. They will create operational efficiencies, but they will also contract the value chain. And that doesn't just mean that your operational division will get smaller. It means that the products you package will be unbundled. And some of you will be meeting later to talk about the API universe. It's not too different. We're living in a universe that is unbundling what we have for centuries considered our business. So it's almost less about the technology and more about how do we start on a journey, at the same time plumbing new and old in a way that will not disrupt our customers and our regulators, but at the same time reconceptualize a world that will be able to allow us to deliver value completely differently understood because of the new technology.
But still, people have a very hard time to grasping all these possibilities about unbundling. And that's actually a very nice bridge to the next topic we're going to get in. You're going to have there's time enough at the end to ask for more questions. But let's now go into topic number 2. And actually, we've been talking about this. This is no longer should we do it, but how do we do it? This is about where the new entrants struggle to get in contact with banks and where our financial institutions struggle with to get this going. So this is about the next layer, the next topic. So can we see the statements? Again, the provocative statements of all our contestants here. All right, and now, of course, I'm going to start on the other hand. We started with, is blockchain relevant? That was clear on this side. Now is, where are you struggling with when dealing with financial institutions? Adam, you don't struggle, or do you?
No, we have no struggles.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, so the question is, what are the struggles in working with financial institutions? So I think that boy, that is a provocative question in front of a room of potential clients. But to be honest, I think that the biggest barrier is taking abstract and making it real. So we can get into endless cycles of talking and planning and meetings and studies and workshops and plenaries and.
But
things.
Where do you struggle? Where do you struggle? Because you're making the same point as you just
yes.
do it, right?
Sure.
Get in contact, use Chain or use somebody else.
Sure.
But where do you struggle with these financial institutions? They don't want to do it. They don't know where to go to. What is the big thing?
I think that by the time we decide to go and build something, for the most part, there is a fear of reaching out to their peers in the industry. And this is starting to slowly change, as we've heard. Wow. But there is still a sense of a prisoner's dilemma, right? If we all work together, awesome, we all win. But if maybe we can have an advantage, what's our strategic advantage? If we go, can we capture some of the market? And so that is definitely a tension.
That's an interesting point. I want to immediately address it to the other side. Are you really struggling with this? Is this one of the things that regulators do not help in that sense? Anyone who wants to comment on that?
Yeah, I think I can talk on that.
Okay, first Oliver, then Neil.
You want to go ahead? Good.
Yeah,
Because you have a good example here.
To Adam's point, about people reaching out trying to do it in isolation. My point is exactly that. Let's not just, and this is true of anything in innovation. Yeah, sitting there, think we know best, we know what to do without partnering, without being part of an ecosystem, without working with startups, without working with students, without admitting actually this is a new area, and we need in new thinking into how our new operating models. We're very lucky in Singapore. There was an article yesterday where I talked about the very tight alignment that we have in Singapore around the government agencies, not just the regulators, but the EDB, the Development Board, IDA, and MAS, and bringing the banks and insurance companies together and having focused projects about bringing fintechs, working with banks, and also having a bit more clarity on regulation. What can we do? What can't we do? Where do they want us to focus? And I think that's a wonderful thing. We're very lucky in Singapore.
I think this is an important topic is the regulators are not looking at themselves as only driving, defining policy. They're setting up business development function like the MS here and putting money out there and driving innovation in the sandbox. Because they like to go through that learning curve at the beginning because they know if they're the first one, they reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty will bring business into a location. So that's a big change from my perspective. If a regulator like an FCA or MIS if they understand, the dynamic of the change.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go back to the newcomers. Joyce, where's your struggle?
Well, so I want to build off of what Lita said about the day zero and what does that look like. And that's actually the big struggle that we have. The unbundling, getting large financial organizations to think about the unbundling has been quite difficult. So we're actually taking a different tactic. We're focusing on microfinance organizations, agriculture co-ops, these non-bank financial institutions, because they can often only do one thing. They can only lend. So our big project for this year is to build essentially a SWIFT-like network for microfinance organizations, this kind of informal sector, because they're trying to figure out how to build up services. And then the goal is, in the future, potentially, would this network be then interoperable with SWIFT and then provide all the banks in the room the ability to send down to the remote rural areas via one connected network or hops between interoperable networks.
But is it easier to deal with microfinance organizations then? Do they have a better understanding than the big financial institutions?
It's very different. They have extreme financial need. They needed the ability to send money ages ago. It's why their communities are not developing. It's why people are poor, right? We don't run into the ego issues. What we run into is lack of developer talent, lack of resources to put into these digital services.
Money.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. Dan.
So the biggest thing we struggle with as an organization is because the industry is generally quite, still new, 6 years of Bitcoin, but there's a real lack of talent of people who understand this technology well enough to actually implement it and design it and deploy it. Less so having issues with the banks, although that was before I joined Digital Asset, I was the co-founder of Hyperledger, which is still operating under Digital Asset. And for us then, we were technologists. We didn't understand the inner workings of banks, why things are the way they are. And so a big appeal for us to joining Digital Asset was working with Blythe Masters, who really has that experience, both of the infrastructure and actually how to navigate internally within banks, why things are the way they are and how they can be improved.
But it's not the fact that banks don't listen, but they simply don't understand. They don't have the right people to understand what you actually say.
I wouldn't say that. No, we've had fantastic, deep conversations with banks. It's more of an issue of hiring. In fact, we bought two startups, one of mine included, in order to get the people we need, and we continue to do that because there isn't enough talent out there in the marketplace. Okay. But no, banks have been incredibly engaged and happy to sit down, and we're way past the exploratory stage now.
All right. Well, guys, we're doing something good here. So, Preston, business that will use blockchain most effectively do not yet exist.
Correct.
That is your big issue.
Yeah, well,
the big issue.
There are two parts to that, though. There's a short term and a long term. In the short term, the risk is that financial institutions are going to chase down the wrong use cases. I disagree, actually, with everybody else on this side of the room, in that I think that clearing is the worst possible use case for it, because blockchains are transparency engines, and they do not do privacy well. And so if you're disclosing everybody's exposures to one another, you're basically giving very sensitive data. So I don't think that clearing is where it's going to get the most traction. So in the short term, I think business process automation within the enterprise, within a bank, bank is going to be where this actually has the most impact. And in that sense, it's not going to be doing things which are already machine-driven, but things which are human-driven, looking for where the slowest element of the process chain is, and that's where you get your order of magnitude improvement. The second piece of this is that if we understand a blockchain as a data verification tool, then we understand that what now happens is a couple of people with some laptops, if they know what a process is and they can write it in code, they can then deploy a network which is capable of competing with a bank on its own terms in data verification at effectively nil cost. So the question becomes, if you can provide the same data verification as a bank without 100,000 employees, then what does it mean to be a bank? That kind of mindset and approach to development, I think, is some way off because we're coming out of Bitcoin and people don't really look at it as process automation. They're still very much stuck in clearing and settlement. And as a company, we're not entirely certain that that's the best use case.
How do you think that this could change?
I think it'll change as you see the POCs moving into more advanced POCs, and you start to see banks will do the analysis of the value chain, and they will determine whether they can actually eliminate jobs. Blockchains are about eliminating people. They are not about eliminating machines.
Again, cost, risk, etc. That's your thought. All right, so coming back here to the bank side, where are you struggling with? Because that's actually the question. Where are the barriers, etc.? And you put up settlements in seconds, a myth.
I think the first barrier is to get an agreement on an open standard. That's because that then also supported by the regulators. I think that if that in place, if that marketing structure is in place, your model, your products, your processes on top of that. You know, the reason why I said settlement in a few seconds, I think it's possible. You know, today it's all about, as Dan said, reconciliation. You exchange messages for 2 days between the different parties. It's a huge effort. There's a market risk, there's operational risk, there's settlement risk, there's an efficiency topic. And then everybody now have a reference point that can point to, we believe that can happen instead of T plus 2 days in maybe T minutes or seconds, etc. And that has an impact on real-time execution, has an impact on efficiency, cost of capital. So massive simplification and looking at the whole settlement volume.
But let's also be honest as bankers. If we can order something at Amazon and it can be brought to you in the same day and the payments is still T plus 2, in fact you have returned all goods, etc. It is reality that we have to move then. And I guess technology is there. The question is then blockchain the right technology or the answer to every question? And you're clearly saying, no, it isn't, because it's open, and in some cases you want more privacy, right? So the private blockchains might be bigger than the open blockchain. Is that what you're saying?
I guess it's, if you're looking at clearing and settlement as the problem, what's the answer? Is it an open standards issue that the banks have failed to resolve for 50 years, or is it a blockchain issue? My suspicion is that it's an open standards issue. You can do things like running 2 separate blockchain clients while having someone like a clearing system in the middle that's running both and then authenticating changes across them. But fundamentally, I don't think you're going to see this one transaction. I was with one bank the other day and they said, so how's this going to work? Are we going to have one blockchain and for 9 of us and we're going to run these 9 nodes? I was like, no. You're going to have 1 billion blockchains, maybe 1 per transaction, and you're going to be sharing all of those between you. So I think the experimentation is going to change a lot about how people are planning to implement these systems. And so, but we just don't know where it's going to come out. That's an empirical exercise.
All right. Thanks. Simon.
See, what's interesting is I can see Adam shaking his head whilst Preston's talking. And I think what you see there is kind of the bank's challenge, which is there is merit in every argument that's been made. I fundamentally agree that what blockchains are really good at is data verifiability. I also think there is something to the settlement and clearing argument. If you think about the pain of banking, as I mentioned earlier, it's errors, it's sanctions, it's everything to do with identity and reconciliation of that. And the reason that complexity existed or evolved was because we had these Towers of Babel, these institutions that built up their own processes. And we all think they're different and better than each other's, but ultimately we do the same sort of stuff in different regulated parts of the world. Now, what a blockchain does is, in my mind, to really oversimplify it, is it means that everybody could potentially crowdsource the validation, and you can choose who does the validation on a per transaction basis. And that is a breakthrough. Now, how we implement that is completely up in the air, and that's the phase we're in at the moment, is the experimentation phase. And so what I'm looking for is, what do I actually endorse? And R3 came along, and it was the best thing because they were so agnostic to everything, and they basically bought that same principle. And when you look at now the technology vendors are getting involved, every technology vendor has an open standard, because that's what they're hearing. Every sort of consultant has an open standard that they're endorsing. But actually, it's kind of, we don't want that just yet. Although we do need the heavyweights starting to endorse those open source projects. And there's a lot of good open source code that all of these guys are involved in. But I think we've got this kind of 12-month period to 18-month period in front of us whilst that kind of crystallizes before we can take action. And as Oliver says, you then parallelize that with your use cases and then the business model that kind of sits around that.
In the end, that is what it's about, right? What is it delivering for our clients?
It's
And whether
online.
it's in indirect cost savings on our side or something else, that's what this is about. But it also clarifies, I think, what you're saying, the 18 months, that this is still an industry or development that is, as you said, at the top of the hype cycle.
Yeah.
We'll now move a bit.
It's super nascent, and I think in not next Sibos, but the Sibos after, everybody will be talking about it like whatever happened to that blockchain stuff. And then in about 3-4 years, it'll just be like, oh yeah, of course, blockchain. And exactly the same happened with mobile, and exactly the same has just happened with big data. Right? It goes through these cycles.
Yeah.
Gartner were pretty smart when they came out with that hype cycle. So the fact that this room is full doesn't mean that your job's changing tomorrow, but if you take your eye off the ball on this thing, then you're in trouble.
Exactly. So, talking about trouble and egos, as a chief of innovation officer, you must have a very small ego to drive this.
Yeah.
Everybody's interfering, everybody wants something from you, especially money.
Yes.
But is it indeed what you said?
Yeah, it's more a
the ego
general
part?
statement actually around innovation generally. I thought I'd take this point that the thing that is going to the difference in the banks that are going to survive the disruption, the banks that aren't going to survive, is around ego. Is the ability to really, it's not about technology, it's not about digital, it's about evolving your culture. Yeah? How can we move to a point we've got a culture more of a tech company?
Yeah.
So we were the first bank in Asia to go out and run a blockchain hackathon. We're engaging tens of startups around this space at the moment. I just come from the SGX yesterday, we had a big hackathon there. And it's more to that point, accept the fact that as bankers, maybe we can't solve some of the challenges we're seeing. And maybe the people that can solve that are, someone called customers, maybe some startups, maybe some university professors, maybe actually our regular vendors are reinventing themselves as well. And so the whole industry is going through disruption. Now is the time is to say, hey, why don't we try something? Why don't we fail? Why don't we experiment? Why don't we admit that we failed at something, but we learned a lot from that? And it's a comment around that. And I think really blockchain is one of those things where a lot of people were like, no, it's not going to affect banking, where a lot of my group's mission is to go, hey, whatever you personally think, let's get on, let's do some experiments, let's chat to some people, let's set up let's get some volunteers inside the bank, studying this technology, and let's get in front of the CEO and see what happens.
I think that the whole credo right now is to fail fast, so that fits. But failing within
and
a
fail
bank
cheap as well.
and fail cheap, yeah.
But the regular, Ravi,
it.
the head of the MS, actually come out with an article that says it's okay for banks to fail.
Where can I get this article? Where can I get
online?
this article?
It's online. But he didn't mean in the big
and
sense.
on which
He meant
topic?
Understand your risks, do small things, try stuff, because then you're more ambitious.
But I agree.
Yeah.
It is okay to fail. Less than before, but still. Lida, any your last comments on this part before I open up the floor for questions?
It would actually be a synthesis of what we heard on the other side of the room. Because to Dan's point, a lot of the talent and the creativity in this space is coming from outside of our organizations. And it's coming, to Joyce's and Adam's points, from organizations that have the single-minded determination of the startup. You do one thing. It could be a complex thing, but you do one thing. And I've been there. It's a different world. When you do one thing and you have all the talent, you have so many of the cards that you're almost unable to play a poker game because the other side is not behaving the same way. We're doing a million things. That's the name of the game on our side. So that is frustrating for the startups and frustrating for the bigger organizations. And I believe that in the past year, a lot of ground has been covered in learning how to converse. But while we're doing all of that, and the use cases we're all working on are a huge help in bridging that gap, Preston, I think, hit the nail on the head right there. And if I can turn that inside out, we live and operate in an organizational setup and in a universe that was not designed on a blank sheet of paper. It evolved over many centuries, many years. It was limited by what we thought we were able to do and then changed by the things we were increasingly able to do by technology. We now have this new capability that ignites the imagination. And some of us are trying to visualize what the world of finance will look like on a blank sheet of paper, but we're not going to start on a blank sheet of paper.
Wow.
So what Preston is describing is making all of us who need to keep bits running while we're changing bits very uncomfortable about where we're going to start. And what happens is we go back to our desks and we imagine the world with a blank sheet of paper, and then we look at today and start with the use cases that make the most sense. But what is probably going to happen, and Simon, maybe the time scale is actually longer than what you described. What's going to happen is we're going to start somewhere. The agenda will be half set by you, half set by us, and we will get to a point where we realize we have to redesign a lot of what we built. And nobody's comfortable with that, but I believe it is what is going to happen, because we will get so much closer to the ability to visualize this brave new world, and we will realize that some of what we built was actually not fit for purpose. The good news is that we can now change it and make it fit for purpose much faster.
Simon?
Yeah, I just want to make a point. The 18 months wasn't about when will we have an industry-grade ledger that we all use. That I don't know if that's 10 years away. But the fact that this sort of battle for souls is going on what does it actually mean, I think that will crystallize over an 18 month to 2 year time frame.
Because at the end you put your eggs in different baskets and then see what's going on, and then
you've got to
evolve.
experiment.
So that is clear. 2-3 years, that means 17, 18, that's the moment where it's all going to happen. So you can ramp up, because that's the moment where you're going to get filthy rich, right? Okay, opening up the floor for questions here in the room. Who? Oh, I'll walk here. The two gentlemen raise their hands simultaneously. You can both ask the question. No. All right.
Hi, this is Jose Ramon from Strategic Investments at JP Morgan. So I have a question regarding the end state. Let's assume that blockchain technology is successful and we are able to use it for, let's say, trade settlement in a certain asset class. So how do you see blockchain interacting with the current clearing and settlement infrastructure? Do you think they will have to interact and work in parallel?
So who do you ask this question to?
Well, I think probably to the entrepreneurs.
All right.
Pretty easily. You just run the blockchain client, and if you know its API, you just have it talking to your clearing API. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't replace everything all at once. You need to build parallel processes, which are less risk. So actually integrating with all the existing systems and then working out which you can remove over time, if any, but achieving that sort of the efficiency with an overlay layer on top of the existing system, rather than, to Leader's point of things are the way they are for a reason. It's built up over a very long time. So starting with parallel processes and seeing what can evolve over time is the best approach.
All right, thank you. Can you hand over the microphone to your neighbor? Yeah.
Laurent Carfard, Barclays. Distributed ledger public or distributed ledgers private?
Oh.
Data Protection Act, private.
Both private for now, private for the next 2, 3, 4 years at least. In the long run, when some of the new technologies Bitcoin could potentially adopt and become a viable solution further down the line, but that'll be a long way off. So private for the short to near term, short to medium.
A question from Luxembourg.
Yes, that's right. I have a question regarding the trust of the solutions. That means specific in the banking area, therefore from the colleagues of the bank, it's very easy easy. I totally agree with you. From a technical side, it is possible to do it. But how is it from the trust side and specific from the responsibilities during the whole chain, knowing that the encryption is still an open issue? Who takes the consequences of crime in between the blockchain?
So that's a really interesting one. The liability structures don't exist yet for this technology. And I think that's why, again, I point at something like R3. They have a legal and regulatory working group to start answering those questions and actually interface with regulators and ask them that question and say, we built this. Here's how it works. Here's an asset class sitting on it. Here are two banks interacting with it. This is, and now we've done it 100,000 times and these were the errors. Now should we build some liability structures around that? To contrast that with today, and what we have is a transaction and then paperwork that follows it. So we build trust around the fact that actually really trust is a risk decision. It's an ability to take the financial impacts of something going wrong and chase it days later with paper and operational cost. If you change that, how much do you change it? So if you take out those operating lawyers, those compliance teams, and you rely on technology, what does that actually mean? And the honest answer is, I don't know. And that's why it's exciting.
But to take that to its logical conclusion, if you think about our entire value system, I know I keep going back to this, but to me that's the answer to everything. A lot of what we do in the financial services is packaging the absence of trust. We have agency arrangements and middlemen and tri-party arrangements exactly because there is no trust. And we have found complex legal and regulatory ways of solidifying that lack of trust as a set of products. This technology will actually take the need for trust away from a lot of what we do. You won't need to trust me. Where it is left, I didn't say everywhere, I said a lot of it. Where it is left, you will use a lot of the current infrastructures, not exactly the same shape, but the same logic. Where you still need to trust each other, there will be human and legal intervention.
But I think her question is more, is this a new solution? Is it reliable? Is it secure? Is it from a legal, from a compliance risk perspective? Is it can I use that? And I have to say, yeah, we are going through a lot of stakeholder buy-in, education, and there's still a long way to go. I would say not only externally, also internally, to bring the different businesses and then also support and control function behind that. It's also an internal buy-in. No?
I think that a point I noticed the other day is blockchain's one of the only technologies that has come pre-tested. Because it came under Bitcoin, we know it's fairly secure, yeah. There's again, one or two hackers have had a crack at Bitcoin, none have succeeded, and we know it scales. I'm not saying it's 100% secure or can scale to the nth degree, but normally when you get new technology, it doesn't operate like that.
It takes time to build that trust, right?
That's it.
Whatever you do, it takes time to build that trust. I have one more question because I passed you. Sorry, guys, I passed you. So one more question and one short answer, please, because we have to wrap it up. Because some of us have to appear somewhere else. So if you have one question, please.
I have one question. I'm Felicitas Aguilar from Dovetail. And maybe my question has no answer because it's for the regulators. So how long is it going to take the regulators to come in and start regulating? Are they going to help or are they going to hinder?
Is there a regulator in the room who dares to speak? There are two conditions.
And again, there are two approaches. Right. No, because I think Neil mentioned that. As a regulator, you have two choices: you wait and see, and then you go to the learning curve afterwards, or you see this as an opportunity, build a business development function. The MLS has a business development function, and they want to be part of that game, part of the ecosystem, learn and understand the limits, the risk, and how they should reflect that in the policy going forward. And if we have a chance to parallelize that, then I think we have, from a timing perspective, a real chance. If we do this in a sequence, I think that will be an issue.
But to be honest, Oliver, bridging this to the next thing, my personal conversation, expectations and experience with regulators are extremely positive on this end. Yeah. Really. Start talking to them, explain what you do, and involve them instead of trying to do something secretly, because they are in the same type of journey as we are. So to move on to the next part, and having discussed this, what kind of investments should we put in? Is it in the front? Is it in the back? Etc. etc. So what I would like to do is repeat one question we asked you at the beginning. So could we get the question back up? So after this conversation, how seriously should your organization be looking at blockchain technology? Are you still not interested? Are you still going to monitor the space? Are you still going to plan to do something soon, or are you really going to do something about it actively and seriously investing in it? I'm really curious what your answer is going to be right now. Click. All right, and here are the answers, and can we get the same answers that we got? Let's see if the things have moved.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. Thanks, dear panel members and speakers. You really moved the needle. Talking about moving the needle, this is instant satisfaction. This is doing it. This is just not talking about it, but going into that sandbox. Although it's warm, but it's still not sand. All right, so thank you. I want to thank you all very much. It is clear that the blockchain has gained enormous in terms of relevancy, and we're now talking about how to do it and if we should do it. We're talking about what kind of platform, should we invest in it, should we do sandboxing, work on the culture and the mindset, and at the same time work on standards and getting and filling that open space. And R3, I think, is one of the interesting developments that we're going to see more of in the coming period. It is also clear that the new guys here struggle with banks, but far less than I expected, actually. It's not about getting in, you're getting entrance, but it's a bit about understanding, knowing, etc. And then there's always, what kind of concept are you talking about? Is everything open, or should there also be parts that are being closed? And I think you're absolutely right. There should be parts that are being closed. It is also clear here that talking about where can you use this the most, it is clear it's about cost, it's about efficiency, it's about risk, etc., etc. And probably there are bigger opportunities, but let's focus on a few first before we end. So before I send you all home, I got sincere instructions to move you to the future of money on L3 in conference room number 2. So there you can really talk about the future of money and digitizations. Thank you all here in the audience, but let's thank the speakers here that we have here in the room. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presence.